We are the table, and we are so glad that you have taken time out of your week to join us. Here at the table, it is our hope to move you forward in life and faith over the course of this message. At the table, we do things just a bit differently. We pose questions in real time, and we want to give you some time to wrestle with those questions as well. Again, thanks for joining us, and we hope that this message moves you forward.
Well, we have been in this series called The Voice over the last 3 weeks, this is the third week. I'm getting ahead of myself, but this is the third week of our series, The Voice. And I told you that I was reading this book called Whisper by Mark Batterson. Fantastic book. If you could, pick it up, get it, read it. It's a game changer. It's a life changer. And so today, during this series, we're giving a book away each week. And so I have no good way to do this other than to play a game and say, on the count of 3, if you would like a book about hearing God's voice, you can just raise your hand. Wait, I didn't say 3 yet. I said on the count of 3, on the count of, hey, I need some help. I have ADD. I can only pay attention to one side of the room. So can somebody else cover the other side for me? Here we go, on the count of 3. Let's do it this way. Okay, here we go. Raise your hand on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. I see Teresa right here. Come on. Teresa, hey, my love, would you help me today again? Thank you so much. Hey, can we give Teresa a hand? All right, Teresa, next week, I want you to come back. I want you to tell me what God's supposed to be speaking to me, all right? You got that? Okay, here we go. Week 3, The Voice. Over the last couple of weeks, we've talked about why and where, why it's important to listen to God's voice. And last week was, where do we hear God's voice? And so if you're wondering where you hear God's voice, I don't have time to recap. You can go and listen to it on our podcast or on our website. But today I want to move to what? From where to why? To what does God's voice sound like? You see, I think for many of us, we struggle to hear God's voice, and not only that, but we don't know what it sounds like when he's speaking to us. And so this morning, I'm going to read this passage of Scripture over your life this morning. Let me go grab it real quick, because it's all the way over here, and I can't read without it. You're good, man. You're good. So this morning, I want to read from Mark's account. I want to read this story over your life. It's a powerful story, and at the end of this, I just don't want it to be a story. I want it to be an owned declaration in your life. I want it to be something that you proclaim over your own life at the end. And so I love Mark's account because it's like the Jesus guide for people with ADD, like me. If you have an attention span of about 30 seconds, Mark's account of Jesus' life is the one to read, because it's so fast, and it's like the Spark Notes or the Cliff Notes of Jesus. That's why I always go to that one. Here's what he says. Would you stand with me this morning as we read from Mark chapter 1? It's only 2 verses. I will not keep you up forever this morning. It says, at that time, Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. Just as Jesus was coming up out of the water, he saw heaven being opened and the Spirit descending on him like a dove. A voice came from heaven. A voice came from heaven. Notice the voice, again, comes after he steps into the water. A voice came from heaven, and he says, "You are my Son, whom I love. And with you, I am well pleased." Oh, come on, you got to hear that today. He says, "You are my Son, who I love, and with you, I am well pleased." You are my son. You are my daughter, and with you, I love, and with you, I am well pleased. Would you turn to somebody today, before we sit down? I want to tell you this. The title of the message is Pre-Approved. Pre-approved. And so on your way down to your seats today, would you turn to your partner and say, congratulations, congratulations, you're pre-approved. You can have a seat. You can have a seat. Ever tell you I had a motorcycle? Ever tell you about the time I had a motorcycle? It is a sad story. So some of you are asking, what happened to it? Did you wreck it? No, worse. We got pregnant. Come on, guys, that was a joke. That was supposed to be a joke. I'm not being serious. Like, kids were absolute blessing in my life. Finding out that we were pregnant was awesome. But here's the deal, right? When Janelle said I could get a motorcycle, always wanted a motorcycle, people said they're dangerous. I'm like, that's why I want one. Sounds like fun. She said, I'll let you get one on one condition. When we have kids, you have to get rid of it. When we have kids, you have to get rid of it. So she was going to visit her parents, and I told her, when you come back from Chicago, I'm going to have a motorcycle. And that weekend, I went out. I already had it picked out. She didn't know it. I was already looking online. I didn't work for like a week and a half. My boss thought I was, really hard at work. I was just looking at motorcycles on the computer. And I found one, and here it is. It was a Yamaha R6 or 6R. I can't remember which one. I think it's a 6R. But this was the bike that I bought. And so I was so excited for her to ride on the back of it. I thought that would be just, what a great way to spend our marriage, on the back of a bike. I wasn't cool enough to get a Harley. I don't have big enough arms, and I'm just not cool enough, so I just went with the street bike. Is that okay? Nobody's prejudging me, are they? All right, good. So I go to pick her up at the airport, and I just said, man, I cannot wait to give you a ride on this new bike. And she said, I cannot wait to give you this gift. And so I said, a gift? Like, you're not a gift giver. She's like, I know, it's an early anniversary gift. And so I opened this little box after just showing her the picture of my new motorcycle. And I pull out this piece of clothing, and it's a onesie. And it says, best dad ever. Now, I would like to say I'm a better human being, but my first thought was not, great, we're pregnant. It was, do I have to sell the motorcycle? Oh, I was excited. Don't get me wrong. I was excited, but I was concerned. Listen, the day after my son was born, I sold that motorcycle. It was so sad to see it go. But here's my favorite story. My favorite story from riding a motorcycle was when my buddy Shane, who was my mentor, he was my pastor, said, let's go riding. Let's go riding around Lee Summit, Missouri. And so I was pretty stoked. I picked him up after a board meeting. His board meeting was running late, and so I was out in the parking lot revving my engine up because I thought, what could be so important at a church board meeting? This is way more important than that. So he came out, and we went riding around Lee Summit, Missouri. And I noticed that when we were riding, people were kind of sort of waving and not waving. There was like a quick wave and a not wave at all. Like, we weren't getting the response I was thinking that motorcycle people give each other. If you're not familiar with motorcycles and riding, you always give people the wave, right? You put your hands down, you give them a wave. That's just a way of saying, I acknowledge you, I see you, you're part of the club, and you don't drive a minivan. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding for minivan jokes last week. Sorry, man, sorry. But I noticed these people aren't giving us a wave, and so when Shane and I stop, he says to me, do you notice people aren't waving at us? I said, yeah, is it because I don't have a Harley? He said, no, the problem's not you, it's me. I didn't think anything of it, but he's familiar with motorcycles. I'm driving this Yamaha R6, and this dude was driving a purple scooter with a Euro helmet on. Somebody had gifted him a purple scooter. It wasn't the purple scooter of Shane, it was the purple scooter of shame. I mean, it was like, he was embarrassed to be on it, but yet he was riding around town with me on this motorcycle. And so I quickly found out that when I was with Shane, nobody would wave. Because apparently there were not enough cc's in the moped to be considered a motorcycle. But what I did learn about that experience was that in driving the motorcycle, one of my favorite things was to get a wave from people. And the thing I think I loved about it was that it was almost like it was immediate acceptance. It was like it was their pre-approval. They didn't know me. I didn't know them. They didn't know what I've done in my life. I don't know what they've done in their life. It was like no background, we didn't know each other's names. It was just, you're on a motorcycle. You're part of the club. Congratulations. It was immediate acceptance and immediate approval. And I just need some of you to hear this today, that when we dive into the story that we read today, the voice that seems to be speaking the loudest is one of unconditional approval. You see, God's voice, if you wonder what God's voice sounds like, it is one of unconditional approval. Can I just say this? God was the originator of the motorcycle wave. I don't know what you believe about God, or if you believe in God, or whatever you believe about God, but what keeps drawing me back to the story of Jesus over and over and over again is that there is this voice that keeps saying to us, with you, I am well pleased. With you, I am well pleased. See, it doesn't matter how much you doubt your abilities. With you, I am well pleased. It doesn't matter how much you screw up in the parenting world. With you, I am well pleased. Kids and students out there, it doesn't matter if you can't meet your parents' expectations. With you, I am well pleased. Listen, I know that you failed in school and you totally botched everything up and now you're not going to college. With you, I am well pleased. I know that your boss tells you that you're a bum, but he says, with you, I am well pleased. And I just need you to understand, the voice that comes from God is not about what you do, but it's about who he says you are. And he says, with you, I am well pleased. Come on, you need to celebrate that this morning because it is worth celebrating. You. God finds pleasure in you. So can you turn to two people, and say, with you, I am well pleased. With you, I am well pleased. With you, I am well pleased. I really need you to get this morning. You see, some of you are going to walk out of here and you're not going to remember the thing we talked about today. But if you did, I want you to remember this. I want you to remember this. Man, put it on your mirror. Put it in your car. Put it next to your bed. Just put your name in there. Brad, with you, I'm well pleased. Janelle, with you, I am well pleased. Cara, with you, I am well pleased. And I tell you, when you start there, it's a game changer. But here's the problem, right? The problem for many of us is that when it comes to what God's voice sounds like in our lives, it constantly feels like we're riding the purple moped of shame. Like, it doesn't matter what we do, it feels like we can't get a wave from God. Can I just tell you what I'm learning in my own life and what I'm experiencing in my own life? Like, there's a fine line between the voice of approval and the voice of accusation. There's a fine line between the voice of God and the voice of the enemy. It's kind of like twins. How many of you know twins? I know some of you know twins around here. I had a friend who had brothers who were twins. And when they introduced me to them, they said, this is Lee and this is Jay. And when I was around them for the first few times, I'm like, are you Lee or are you Jay? And sometimes I would call Lee Jay, and sometimes I would call Jay Lee. And it wasn't until I spent a significant amount of time around them that I began to notice the subtle differences in their demeanor, the way they carried themselves, their facial expressions, and even the way they talked. And I just want you to understand that you must spend a significant amount of time. You must familiarize yourself with the voice of God. Otherwise, the voice of accusation will always win. The voice of accusation, when you don't know what God's voice sounds like, will always win in your life. You will ride the purple motorcycle of shame the rest of your life if you don't know what God's voice sounds like. Let me teach you the difference between the two. This is what I'm learning. The voice of accusation says this: because of that, you are, and you can't. Because of that, you are, and you can't. But the voice of acceptance says, you are, and because of that, you can. You are, and because of that, you can. You see, when I've been meeting with these young men, and we've been mentoring them one-on-one, and one of the things that I talk about constantly with them is knowing what voice is speaking to you. Because if you don't know the voice that's speaking to you, your faith will fail in a matter of no time. I guarantee it. And here's why. Because the voice of accusation, the word Satan, sometimes we call him the devil, sometimes we call him the evil one, sometimes we call him the enemy. Satan literally means accuser. It's the voice of accusation. And here's the thing, the last thing Satan wants you to do, the last thing the enemy wants you to do is to step up into your purpose, to find the reason why you're here, to get into the purpose that God has for you, and to be a part of lives that you're going to change. That is the last thing that the voice of accusation wants you to do. So you know what he does? You know what he does? He says, hey, because of that, do you remember the past? Let's go back there for just a few minutes. Because of that, do you remember that person that you wronged? Because of that. Do you remember the failed marriage or the failed relationship? Yeah, because of that. Do you remember like the last diet fad that you were on and you failed that one more time? Like, because of that. Like, because you didn't graduate from school. Because of that, he then says, you are. You are a failure. You are an addict. You are a negative person. You will never amount to nothing. And because of that, guess what? You can't. You can't. And here's what I know. The voice of accusation will always make you feel like the same person even though you've changed. Man, I tell you what, 30 years ago, like, man, I know that I met Jesus. I know that he's changed my life, but the voice of accusation always makes me feel like I'm still the same person. And there are so many days where I come in here and I stand in front of you and I think to myself, you can't. You can't. Because of that. Oh, come on. The voice of approval starts with, not because of that. It starts with, you are. You are. I love it. Psalm 46 says this. It says, stop striving and know that I am God. Stop working at it. Stop trying to figure it out. Stop trying to jump through hoops. Stop trying to figure this whole thing out. And just know that I am God. Which to some of us, I'm like, great, who's God? I just want to tell you this today, that God is love. That's where he starts in the story. He says, you are. And what does he say next? You are loved. You are loved. And because of that, I am well pleased. Can I just tell you today that this is where the voice of acceptance begins? It says, you are good. You are beautiful. You have a purpose. You have a reason in your life. There is a reason why I've created you and made you. And not only are you good, but regardless of what you've done, with you I am well pleased. This is what the voice of acceptance and what the voice of God sounds like in your life. Hey, good news. We're about to end this. Here we go. Ready? So here's what I want you to know today. You are pre-approved. You are pre-approved. You ever get these letters in the mail? Am I the only one that gets these? Everybody else have bad credit or something? Okay. I get these in the mail. This one says pre-selected, as if that sounds better than pre-approved. But when you tell me that I'm pre-approved, It makes it sound like, hey, I'm good to go. You should just send me the card. But they never do. You see, when they tell me that I'm pre-approved, and this is why it's hard for us to understand, is because the banks have corrupted our understanding of it. What they're saying is, man, there's a huge form in here we would love for you to fill out. Give us your name. Give us your birth date. Give us your social security number. Tell us where you live. Give us your credit card information. Just tell us everything about your life. Because we're going to do a credit check, we're going to do a background check, we're going to make sure that you haven't done this wrong, that wrong. We're just going to make sure that you're good to go. You have to jump through hoops in order to be pre-approved to get the card. And I just love this because as I was reading this story about Jesus being baptized, the question that kept coming back to me is, why was Jesus baptized? Which is this huge question that we don't have time to answer. If I do, we'll get in the weeds. And right now, we don't have time to get in the weeds. But here's what I understand when I go back to the story. You see, in Mark's account, when Jesus is baptized, it's the first thing he does. He hasn't done anything wrong. He hasn't begun his ministry. He hasn't started his life. He's not done anything up to this point. And when he walks into the water and is baptized, the Father says, with you I am well pleased. You see, baptism is God's wave. Baptism is God. He was the originator and perfecter of the motorcycle wave. I'm telling you, baptism is a way of saying you are pre-approved. This is how it works. You are welcome into the kingdom. You are part of the club. You are immediately accepted. There's nothing you can do. There are no forms you can fill out. There are no hoops that you can jump through. There is no background checks or credit checks will get you into the kingdom of God. It is only because God says to you, you are. You are. You are forgiven. You are good. You are beautiful. You have a reason. And I am pleased with you. Today we get to celebrate that baptism is not just God's wave of acceptance, of his unconditional approval, but baptism is our wave. Baptism is our wave to other people to say, doesn't matter where I've been, what I've done, who I've screwed over, who I've wronged, doesn't really matter anymore. I'm not the same person. Because God's love for me is unconditional. And so this morning we're going to tell a couple stories about two young ladies who gave their life to Jesus. And because of that, they've decided to be baptized. Not as a confession that their sins are forgiven, not as a way of saying like, I feel so sorry about my life. They're waving to you to say, oh man, when God's voice speaks to me, he says, with you, I am well pleased. And so can I just say to you today, if you've been baptized before, may this be a reminder to you that as you see this act of man, it's, I don't know what we call it, other than just amazing. May it be a reminder to you that God is pleased with you. And if you've never been baptized before in your life, I pray that it would encourage you. It would encourage you to say, it doesn't matter because I'm already pre-approved.
He's gave me courage and he's gave me truth and stuff, and he helped me with so many things. To show him how much I appreciate what he did for me on the cross. trust in Jesus.
I'm Peyton Marshall, and I'm a senior in high school. Before Jesus came into my life, I was struggling to find positivity in certain things. Oftentimes, tough decisions would become very hard for me to make. I was feeling a lot of pressure to constantly have my life figured out and have to know everything. When Jesus came into my life, he gave me guidance, and he kind of helped me make these tough decisions. He kind of took over and lit the path for me, and showed me, that I didn't need to have life figured out. He opened my eyes a little bit in a more positive direction. I would say go for it. Follow Jesus. He will help you in the right direction. He will lead you where you need to go, and he loves you no matter what, despite any sin that you could possibly do. He loves you, and so don't be afraid to follow him, because he'll love you, and he'll always guide you to the right direction, and show you where you need to go.
If this message challenged you and moved you forward, personally or in faith, we encourage you to share it with someone who needs a message of hope today. And if you're interested or looking for ways to partner with us in our mission here at the table, head on over to thetablejoliet.org for more information.